This is a computer. You may know it as that mystical box of electronic wizardry underneath your desk, but I'm here to tell you that it isn't as confusing as you may first assume. This video will go over the components found in a computer and what they do. These components can be found in some sort of capacity in laptops, mobile phones, and any other computing devices you may use. I am Royalty, and I hope you enjoy the video. This is a motherboard. It is a circuit board to which all of the other components of the computer connect. This motherboard is the AsRock Z87 Extreme 4 Micro ATX motherboard. One of the main parts that the motherboard contains is the processor socket. This is where the processor, or central processing unit, don't worry, we'll cover this later, is plugged in to the motherboard. To the right of the motherboard are the RAM slots. This is where you plug in your random access memory, or just memory as most people call it, into your motherboard. To the right of that is the 24-pin power plug, for power obviously, and your PCIe slots are below it. These are your SATA ports where you plug in your SSDs and hard drives and all that jazz. Up here are your voltage regulation models, or VRMs. This regulates the power coming into the motherboard and the processor. Down here we have the Southbridge controller. This controls all of the data flow between the various parts of the computer through the motherboard. Up here we have the external ports of the computer. This is the bit that you'll see on the back of your computer in day-to-day usage. This is where you plug in your monitors, your USB ports, and as I'm showing here, your VGA port, DVI, and there's some USB 3 for some fast data transfer. And I think there's a HDMI port hiding down there as well. Some more USB ports, external SATA, a network port for internet, and more USB 3 and 5.1 surround sound. It's very, very nice. Those external ports are controlled by this onboard sound chip, which will enhance and regulate and amplify the sound to make it sound lovely and crisp and lovely. This is the random access memory, or just memory, as I mentioned earlier, and that plugs into the right of the motherboard. This memory is the fast, immediate access. When you open an application, it is stored in the memory here. It has a heat spreader on top to help with heat dissipation, as I've shown. And now, what have we got next? Next, this is the graphics card, or GPU. This is the graphics horsepower, the bit that gamers find juicy. This is what takes the input from your game, or whatever else you're doing, and constructs it into all of the little pixels on the screen. It's basically a separate computer within itself, with its own processor and memory inside it, but it is optimized to do lots and lots of little jobs, that is, changing the color of 16 million pixels on the screen at once. And the better graphics card you have, the better performance you can get in video games, which is what a lot of gamers are concerned about. Next we have the CPU, or Central Processing Unit. It comes with this little fan that's used to cool it, but we're not going to use that, so I'll put it aside here. I'm going to use something a bit more beefy. This is the actual unit itself. It's probably the most expensive component in your system, and it's the brains of the computer. It's the heavy horsepower that does all of the thinking, the calculations and problems as fast as possible. Now this is the Intel Core i5 4670K, and it's clocked at 3.4 gigahertz and has 4 cores, so you know, lots of performance. Right, next we have the water cooler. Here we go, the water cooler. This is what we're going to exchange for that flimsy little box cooler you saw earlier, and it offers significantly more cooling performance. Now, a water cooler like this cools the processor very much like a car radiator does, as in you have a little block on top of the heat outputting things, and you have hot water pipes taking it to a radiator where the heat is dissipated away from the case. Now this provides a lot of benefits. Namely, if you have a cooler processor, it means you can overclock it. That is, make the processor operate faster than it's supposed to in exchange for, you know, it producing more heat and not lasting as long. But, you know, free performance. Never say no to anything free, eh? Now let's see what we have next, shall we? This is the SSD, or solid state storage, not spinning something storage, which I have heard someone say before. This is very fast backing storage. So this is where you actually put all of your files and video games and programs and all that sort of thing. And when you open them, they are moved from the backing storage into the RAM. And a lot of people get confused between memory and storage, but this is what you store everything on, and the RAM is what the computer is actually running off. So don't get confused between the two. And the next we have, oh yes, these are hard disk drives. They are in a way similar in terms of what they do to SSDs. They are backing storage and they're permanent and they don't degrade over time like RAM does. But they are much, much slower. But in exchange for that much slower access speed, they can store a lot more stuff. So they're used for storing things like files instead of programs, which you'd more likely put on your SSD for speed. And this is the power supply. And the power supply, obviously, as the name probably connotates, connotates? That's not a word. Connotes. Supplies power to the rest of the system and gives everything it needs, everything power. So, for instance, that 24-pin power plug that I showed you on the motherboard, the plug, that big plug there, will plug into the motherboard there. It'll also have plugs for your graphics cards and your hard drives and whatever else. This is what it looks like all put together, all of the components, but I've made a little time lapse of the entire process of getting from the component stage to the complete stage, so enjoy!